This is Sylvion, which is a 1 or 2 player game where you are trying to protect this forest from fire elementals that are trying to destroy it. It has this really neat box design where, it folds out kind of like a storybook, and it's kind of a playful design. You have this little token here, if I can get it to come out. And then you have the cards. Okay, so this is Sylvion when it's set up. You're going to take your edge cards, which are these ones that are lined in green, and lay them out like this with 4 on each side. And then you're going to take the Ravage cards, and you're going to set them up in 4 equal stacks. And you'll put a number of cards into these stacks depending on how long you want the game to be. The shortest game that I think is viable is 8 cards in each stack. And I think the longest game I've played is 15 cards in each stack. So you'll shuffle these up, and you'll split them up into 4 equal piles with however many cards you want in each pile, depending on how long you want your game to be. There's a lot of variation in the cards, so you're going to have a lot of extra ones. There's a lot of scalability and difficulty in those cards, so you can kind of pick through and make an easier deck if you want to play an easier game, or make it a lot harder if you want to try to make it a harder game. There are also bad versions of the cards that you'll have in your hand that you can put into your deck of cards to clog up your hand and make that harder. You could also start the game with some of these edge cards flipped over to their damaged side already, so that you have fewer hit points in the game. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make the game more difficult or easier depending on what kind of game you want to play with this. So for starting the game, you're going to draw 6 to 8 cards from this deck for yourself. This is another difficulty balancing mechanic. In the solo version of the game, you're supposed to start with 8 cards. In the 2-player version of the game, each player is supposed to have 6 cards. But this is just more ways of changing the difficulty. At the start of each round, you're going to begin by revealing the top card of each of these Ravage stacks. So here we've got 4 cards that we're going to reveal, and each of these in this setup, since I've stacked this so that we can talk about these cards, is a fire elemental, which is probably the most common card that you're going to come across in the Ravage decks. And these are all 4 types of fire elemental that you'll see in the game, from strength 0 to strength 3. At this point, you will resolve any instant effects that happen for cards as these get revealed, which none of these have. You could play cards out of your hand right now to destroy cards, but we'll get to that later. After we've moved past those phases, each of the fire elementals in play will advance 1 space, like this. So see, we have this 4x4 grid, effectively, that these fire elementals will cross as the game progresses, moving 1 space every turn, at least, hopefully, only 1 space every turn, as they relentlessly move toward this side of the forest, and anytime one of them reaches this edge and touches the trees, we're going to take damage equal to its strength. So in the case of this fire elemental, it's only a strength 1, so if it got all the way across, we'd burn down one of our trees. The game's going to end if we ever are completely out of trees and need to lose hit points. Let's go ahead and look at what's next in the Ravage stacks. So this card tells you that you're going to either discard one card from your hand at random. So, I've got these cards that are in my hand, so I could shuffle these up and lose one. Or I can pick 2 from my hand to discard. So if I have things in my hand that I really don't want to risk losing because I think they're essential for me in that turn, I may want to see if there's 2 things I can give up and put in my discard pile. With this card, I'm going to randomly remove 1 card from my discard pile from the game permanently. With your discard pile, whenever you run out of cards in your deck, you're going to shuffle your discard pile, and it's going to become your new deck. Depending on how difficult of a game you want to be playing, whenever that happens, you may also remove cards from the new deck. It's called demobilization. It's just a way of penalizing you for running out of cards in your deck. But anyway, this card is telling you you're either randomly losing one of those cards from your discard pile, or you need to choose 2 cards from your discard pile and remove them from the game permanently. So, in the same way, forcing you to make the decision, can I accept, losing 1 thing at random, or are there 2 things there that I could give up and live with? This card tells you that you need to upgrade the level of each fire elemental that's in play. So if it's a 1, 2, or a 3, it's going to go up in level 1. So 1s will become 2, 2s will become 3s, 3s will become 4s, and 0s become 4s, which is what this stack of cards over here is for. So here we've got a 2 that we can put into play to replace this 1, and a 3 to replace this 2. And then on the back sides of these we have 4s. So we'll put a 4 into play to replace this 0, and we'll put a 4 into play to replace this 3. So all of a sudden, our fire elementals got significantly more powerful because we revealed this card. It's worth noting that this only affects fire elemental cards, like these ones. Blaze cards, which is what these upgraded ones are called, don't level up when this gets revealed. So this 2 isn't going to become a 3 if we reveal another one of these, and this 3 won't become a 4. So this is as bad as these elementals are going to get. This one is telling us that all of the fire elementals, and this time we're including blaze cards, all fire elementals that are on the board immediately advance 1 space. So all of these special action cards get discarded immediately after they've been resolved, because they aren't important to us anymore. And then everything advances 1 space, just like we saw with the end of the last round, after we'd finished revealing things. So you can see very quickly these fire elementals are progressing toward our line of trees, so it's going to be really important that we're playing these cards that we're going to talk about in a second to give you an idea of the way this works. But before we talk about these cards, let's talk about this last set of 4 Ravage cards that I have set up for us here to see what kinds of things you have to worry about over here in these stacks. So I'll just reveal all 4 of these, and then we'll talk about them. All of these cards come from the expansion, which is included in the game, but you may not want to use them just because, as you're going to see, these can add a lot of difficulty to the game for you. So this first one is the Acid Lake. It's going to advance automatically to the first open slot, which is over here. So if this card had been here, this would have been the first open slot. Or if we had played cards into this first row, it might have been pushed back. But as it is, it's going to move all the way over here. In the event that every space in this row was full of cards already, this card would just get discarded and wouldn't have an effect for us. What the Acid Lake means is that this space effectively no longer exists in our grid. So when this elemental goes to advance into this spot, it's not there, it just advances right into here. So at the end of this phase, with these cards being revealed, I'm probably going to take 4 points of damage right now, which is a third of your total possible life. So that's pretty detrimental to this position in the game for us. This is the Tornado, and what this is telling us is that any fountain cards or tree cards that are in this row would get picked up by this tornado and would come back into your hand. So if I had played, say, this fountain as a defense against this card so that it's going to destroy this fire elemental rather than letting it get through, all of a sudden this tornado has come along and this gets picked up and is back in my hand. And now I'm going to have to try to get it out there or do something else to defend, which is probably not going to be possible for me right now in the way that this game is set up. If I don't have any trees or fountains in this row, which is the case right now because we haven't been playing cards because we're just talking about the Ravage deck, if I don't have any of these in play when the tornado comes into this row, instead I have to take 2 cards that are in my hand and put them back on top of my deck, effectively depriving me of drawing new cards that turn. So this can be a really bad card for you to get at any point in the game. This is the Rain of Stones, and what's going to happen here is the first tree or fountain that is in this row gets destroyed. So if I had any trees or fountains here, they'd get removed from this field of play. And if it makes it all the way across, then you take 1 point of damage. So I'm losing 1 point because I didn't have any trees or fountains in this row to defend against this Rain of Stones. The last one here is the Geyser. And just like the lake, it's going to jump to the first available space. Just like the Acid Lake, if all of these spaces are filled, the geyser would just get destroyed, and you wouldn't get to put it into play. The geyser actually is helpful for you. You can destroy the geyser to destroy every fire elemental that is in either a horizontal plane or a vertical plane with it. So I could destroy this right away to go ahead and get rid of this fire elemental, which is probably what I would do. But I could also wait until these have advanced and destroy in a vertical line. So you have different options there that you can use with the geyser. So it's actually a beneficial card that's in these Ravage decks, and it's another way to kind of balance difficulty just a little bit and give you some good surprises that are hidden over here in the Ravage cards. So we've revealed all of these cards, and now all of these things are going to advance. And just like we talked about, this Acid Lake makes this not a space. So this Fire Elemental just advances, and we take 4. And then this card is out of our way, because once it has made its way across, we don't need to worry about it anymore. And we're going to advance these cards. Unfortunately, as much as we would like to be able to use this geyser to destroy these 2 cards to get rid of 5 hit points, we can only choose to do that during the part of the phase where we get to play cards, which is going to happen after these cards have moved. So this card moves into the geyser, and when that happens, both the geyser and this card are destroyed. So we don't get to set this off to take out this 5 points worth of damage, but we are going to get to destroy this 4 points worth of damage. So it's not all bad, but it would have been nice if we'd been able to do that just a little bit more on our terms to reduce damage in this game. So there we've gone through, that's what you're going to see when you go through the Ravage deck. Those are the types of cards that are in it. And you can see just how quickly you are losing this game, because, you know, the next turn we're going to reveal 4 more cards, and this 5 points, if we haven't been able to stop it, is going to move in, and we're going to lose another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards, and we've almost lost the game, right? So let's talk about what we can do to mitigate that damage by playing cards out of your hand and how that works. I've brought us back to the start of a game, so now that we have a good idea of what is in these piles in general. So let's go ahead and start by revealing our stacks of cards. So we've got a 3 Fire Elemental, and we didn't talk about this icon the first time, this little Angry Fire token. Whenever we have a card that's revealed that has that on it, and there aren't very many of them, it's telling you to add this token to the card. And what this token is going to do is it's effectively giving this Fire Elemental an extra life. So if it encounters a fountain that would destroy the Fire Elemental, instead of that happening, this token will get removed. And then the fountain gets destroyed, and this Fire Elemental will continue toward this side of your forest. Any card that you play that lets you destroy this Fire Elemental just removes the token, and the Fire Elemental gets to continue across. If this Fire Elemental makes it all the way across with this token on it and reaches this side of your forest, you lose the game immediately. This is not something that you have to play with, and it certainly makes the game more difficult. So if it's something that you don't want to deal with in your first plays, by all means, just ignore this icon and don't use this token. If you want to play a harder game, then go ahead and use it. It's just a variant for increasing difficulty, like a lot of these things are. So we've got another Fire Elemental and another Fire Elemental, and we're upgrading the levels of Fire Elementals. So all 3 of those are level 4 Fire Elementals because of this card. So this card is going to get removed, and all of these are going to advance into this first spot. Yeah. As level 4 fire elementals, because we had 2 3s and a 0. And all of those upgrade to 4s. So, we're at this point, and now we can play cards from our hand. We're starting the game with either 6 or 8 cards in our hand. Like I talked about, in the solo game, you're starting with 8. In the 2-player game, you're starting with 6. But you can adjust those numbers if you want to make the game easier. And then you're going to draw 3 cards in the solo version of the game, and 2 cards for each player in the 2-player version of the game. Though there's an argument about whether or not that's a mistranslation, because the French version of the rules tell you to draw 3 cards in both versions. So, you know, if you would rather be drawing 3 cards for each player in the 2-player game, go ahead and do it. It's just going to make the game a little bit easier and give you more options. Where, if you want to reduce the number, it's just going to make the game a little bit harder. Okay, so you reach this phase, and you're going to draw either 2 or 3 cards. And you need to play cards, because as you saw, it's very quick that these fire elementals are going to advance and completely destroy your forest. So you need to be playing cards to counteract that. And all of your cards have similar layouts. They're all going to have a water drop in the top left-hand corner, and that tells you both how much the card costs to play and how much the card is worth as currency to pay for playing other cards. So this fountain card has a cost of 2, so I could discard these 2 tree cards that each have a value of 1 to pay this cost. Cards that get played out here into the field, like fountains and trees, also have this leaf icon on them, and the number that's inside the leaf icon tells you the strength of that card. So this is a strength 3 fountain, and trees always have 0 strength. So whenever a fire elemental encounters one of these cards that you've got played out here into the grid, you're going to compare the numbers on the cards. So this is a 4 fire elemental, and this fountain has a strength of 3. 4 is bigger than 3, so this fountain is going to get destroyed. And when that happens, 2 things happen. You get to draw a card as compensation for having lost this fountain that moves to your discard pile because it's been destroyed. And this fire elemental is going to advance an extra space because he's so relentless and angry about having burned through this fountain. Similarly, when a fire elemental encounters a tree, you're going to compare the strength of the fire elemental with the tree. This is a 4 fire elemental, and all trees are 0. So the tree will be destroyed and go to your discard pile. When trees are destroyed, you don't get to draw an extra card, but the fire elemental still advances an extra space, because fire elementals are relentless. You'll have some cards in your hand that have a cost of 0. So you can just play these trees for free, because they don't cost you anything. And you may want to do that if you have, like, a fire elemental that's strength 0, like we did before these upgraded. If this was still here, you might have wanted to play this tree here for free, because when these 2 cards encounter each other, if the strengths are the same, both cards get destroyed. So we would lose this tree, but we'd also get rid of this fire elemental. The highest strength for anything is 4, so having these 3-4 fire elementals is really difficult for us here in this first turn of the game. And we don't have anything in our hand that's really that valuable. So all we can do is play our one level 4 fountain. And we're going to lose it, but we might as well go ahead and get it out there. So we'll pay the cost of 3 with these 2 trees and this fountain that each have a cost of 1. And put those into our discard pile. Trees aren't particularly useful to you during the game, except to discard as currency. Or in that example that we were talking about with a level 0 fire elemental, would be destroyed while burning up the tree. At the end of the game, though, trees have this icon at the bottom that has a tree with a number inside it. That's telling you how many of these cards around the edge you're going to flip back to their green side for every tree that's still out there in play. So, if we got to the end of the game right now and both of these are still in play, we'd recover 4 of our hit points. This can be a really big deal because if you have even one card on the red side at the end of the game, you lose. So you need to be really aware as you get close to the end of the game, which is going to happen when these Ravage stacks empty, when we've revealed that last card and resolved it, and we've completed our turn, and everything is out there. You need to pay attention to how many hit points you need to recover and have trees that are out there to give you that value back, or you're going to lose the game. So trees aren't really useful while you're playing, except as discard currency, but they're really useful at the end of the game. So that was really the only thing we could do on our turn, because everything else we have is either a really low-level fountain, so we could put, this Strength 1 fountain into play just so we'll be able to draw a card when it gets destroyed. We can play this Strength 0 Elk card out of our hand that regenerates health for us. You see it's got the same icon with the trees and numbers. It's not helpful to us right now because all of our trees are good. So this first turn isn't going well for us. We can play these level 0 trees, or we could hang on to these to keep in our hand as something to discard if we had any of those Ravage cards that force us to discard cards that we talked about earlier, which is probably the more valuable thing to do with them for us right now. But because their cost is 0, their currency value is 0, so we also won't be able to use them to pay for anything. So we get to the end of our round, and we're going to reveal new Ravage cards at the start of the next round, and we'll continue advancing in this same way. So let's talk about all of the different cards that we have available to us as tools, now that you've kind of seen the way that one round plays with playing cards, so you have an idea of what all the things you can do are. So let's take a look at all the different cards that are in the Defender deck, this deck of forest cards and fountains and creatures that help you defend the forest. We have 4 different types of fountains that you can get, and they range in strength from 1 to 4, and from cost 0 to cost 3. So these are cards that you're going to want to get out there to defend against fire elementals and use them to hopefully destroy things if you don't end up in an example like what we had where we just started with strength 4 fire elementals right off the bat. Hopefully you get a little bit of a slower start and you can actually use these cards to destroy elementals. There are likewise 4 different trees. And as you can see, they all have strength 0, so they are not useful for defense for you. And they range in recovery strength from 1 to 4, and from cost 0 to cost 3, just like the fountains. So early in the game, these are primarily going to be useful as cards that let you pay your costs to play other cards, or as discard fodder for like these level 0s, where you can't use them for paying for costs. And then when you get to the end of the game, you know, having even just one of these level 4 trees is a lot of recovery, because that's a third of your life. So then we have a lot of cards that have different types of special powers. We have this flying whale that lets you move a fire elemental 3 spaces in any direction. So, you know, if we have this level 0 fire elemental that's, you know, right here and is making its way toward this tree, you might shift it back so that you have more time, or move it down into one of your other rows where you have a fountain that you can use to destroy it. More likely you're going to want to be using this on, you know, like a strength 3 fire elemental, where it's a lot more dangerous and you need to position it to destroy it, hopefully. We have the owl that just lets you draw 3 more cards, which is just a really handy pay 1 cost and add 3 cards to your hand, and hopefully that gives you what you need to either defend or pay the bigger costs. So we have the fish that you pay 1 and it adds 3 to your available spending cost. So, you know, for effectively the cost of 1 card, you're able to pay for one of those strength 4 fountains, which can be tremendous for you. We already saw this when we were looking at the first play round example, but the stag here either regenerates 2 trees immediately, or gives you 1 for every tree card that you have out in the board. So late in the game, if you've played a lot of trees, you could use the stag to recover a lot of your health. If you don't have any trees, then, or you only have 1 or 2 trees, then you're just going to get 2 points of health back with the stag card. The elephant lets you destroy any 1 fire elemental that's on the board. So for a cost of 1, one of these strength 4 fire elementals that we were dealing with in our example, you just remove it from the game and it's out. You don't have to worry about fighting it anymore. So you have a lot of tools to let you kind of manipulate things and get rid of your problems. The hedgehogs are a reaction card. This is one of the only cards that you get to play out of turn. So as soon as we revealed, for example, this card that caused us to have 3 level 4 fire elementals instead of 2 level 3s and a level 0, we could have played hedgehogs to cancel that card as soon as it was revealed. You can't wait. So when you're revealing cards, if you revealed this first and you didn't know if there was something worse that was coming, you can't wait. You have to decide immediately when it's revealed if you're destroying it with hedgehogs or not. These squirrels will allow you to pick up the top 2 cards of each Ravage stack and take a look at what they are, and then you can put them back in the order that you want. You can't mix up the stacks, though, so you need to make sure you keep the 2 cards from each stack separate from each other, and decide which card is going to be on top and what the order is going to be. And this is great in combination with these birds, which allow you to discard the top card of each Ravage stack. So if you can play squirrels to take a look at what's there and set the worst card on top of each stack, then you can play birds and discard that card from the game. So the rules talk about one of the variants for playing the game being that you build the deck and do kind of a card drafting, deck building phase before beginning the game. And it includes these 8 cards that I'm going to talk to you about for that process. Sean and I will talk about what we think about that card drafting mechanic during the review bit. But I'll go ahead and show you these cards. I think that you can use them in the way that the rules describe in the card drafting, where if they come up, you just set them aside, and they're one-use cards whenever you want that are just face up during the game for you to choose to play at your need. Sean and I usually just shuffle them into the deck, whichever ones we're going to be using in a game, and when they come up and are in your hand, you can use them, and we just kind of treat them as a normal card in that way. So let's just look at what these are. These change the game. Some of them are cards that change the conditions of the game, and some of them are just kind of super powerful versions of the card that shares art with them. So we've got the Owl, which lets you look through your Defender deck for 2 cards of your choice and put them into your hand. So rather than just drawing the top 3 cards, you get to look for anything you want. The Elephants lets you discard all cards from the battleground, not just fire elementals, but even your cards too. So both beneficial and detrimental cards get removed from the board when you play this. The Hedgehogs allow you to skip the next time you would reveal cards from the Ravage stack. So you effectively get a turn where you aren't revealing new cards, you get to draw cards, and you get to deal with whatever's out there on the board already. The Squirrels allow you to pick up the top 2 cards of each Ravage stack, just like the other squirrel card that we just talked about. But this time you can mix them up. So you're going to take all 8 of these cards and decide what order you want to put them back in which stacks, as long as you're still putting 2 back on top of each stack. The Stag. With the Stag, if there are 8 tree cards on the battlefield, so if you've played 8 trees and this card is in play, you immediately win the game. So, changing the win condition of the game, so you don't have to get to the bottom of the Ravage stacks, you just have to have 8 trees in play. The Fish, if you have 10 fountains out on the battlefield, you win the game immediately. With both of these, you have to have at least 1 tree or 1 fountain of each level. Though I'm pretty sure that to have 10 fountains or 8 trees, you would have to have at least 1 of each. But that may not be true. With the Birds, if you have 16 cards in your hand, you immediately win the game. And then the Whales are the most bizarre of them. If there's ever a situation where you have 12 elementals out on the board, and all 12 of your edge card trees have been flipped over to their red sides, so you're about to die, and you have 12 fire elementals out on the board to deal with, the whale allows you to immediately win the game with those conditions, which is just a really strange win condition, but there you go. So at the end of the game, in our last round, we've just revealed all of the cards that are the last in their stacks for the Ravage. And what's going to happen is we go ahead and resolve these cards, and in this case, they're all fire elementals. So all of them are resolved, and we're going to go ahead and advance all of our fire elementals across the board. And then we'll go ahead and play our cards to finish the round. So all of these 4 cards advance 1 space. This fire elemental advances 1 space and destroys this fountain. So it gets discarded, and we draw a card off the top of the deck to add to our hand, which was a really lucky card for us to draw. And now we can play cards. So I'm going to go ahead and play the card I just drew, which is a stag. It costs 0, and it is going to add either 2 trees back into our strength, or 1 for each tree that we have in play. And right now there are 3 trees in play, so we'll go ahead and do that. And add 3 back to our total strength. Now we can play any cards in our hand, but we don't have anything that's useful to us right now. So what's going to happen is all of these fire elementals are now going to advance all the way for the last round. So here this 3 advances and hits this fountain and is destroyed, because it's a strength 4 fountain. This strength 4 fire elemental reaches the end here, and we take 4 points of damage. 2, 3, 4. And then we discard that. So this level 0 is going to advance all the way, but because it's strength 0, it doesn't do any damage to the trees on this end. The only real danger with 0s is if they get upgraded to level 4s and just tear you apart. So that just gets discarded. This 2 hits this 2 fountain, and both are discarded. So we destroyed this fountain, and, we get to draw a card, but it doesn't matter because it's the final assault. So, we draw a card, but we can't play it. And then this level 0 fire elemental advances and destroys this tree that we had there. We have 7 strength worth of trees still standing after the final assault, so 7 of these cards flip back over, which is more than our total, so we came all the way back up to full strength, and we win the game. If we hadn't had this 3, we would have lost, because we would have been just barely under strength and had 1 card flipped over, so it's really easy to lose if you aren't paying attention to that little bit of detail. So let's go ahead and talk about what we think about this game. Okay, so we are talking about Sylvion, and you have a lot more to say about this because you played it a lot more times than I have.
Right. So I guess I would start out by saying I haven't played any other games in the Oniverse setting. I don't know if that's a big draw towards this game. It's possible you might like one game in the series and want to play the others.
Sure.
And I think that's a valid thing to state right off the bat, as I haven't played any other ones. This isn't the first one in the series. And so I don't think that really matters, because I think you should judge the games probably individually, but someone who likes one would probably be more interested in pursuing this and
'cause
collecting
you're
it.
in the theme of the world already, so
Yeah.
that's interesting to you in theory.
So right off the bat, that is sort of I would understand if someone like that's the primary reason why they pick up this game.
Sure.
So my experience with this is that you and I played it.
Yeah, we've played the 2-player game a few times.
And then I played a solo game between that because we got crushed.
Yeah. Our first game went really horrible for us.
So I played a solo game trying something different, and it was a cakewalk. Then we played again.
And we got crushed.
So I kind of went, well, what if I did this or that? And I played with the balance of cards. I played 2 more solo games, changing things, and both of those games were a cakewalk again. This is a regular comment online, and so it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
The solo game appears to be, on average, really easy. The 2-player game appears to be, on average, really hard.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem with the game, and I don't really know what to say about it in terms of, like, So the good thing about this game is that it gives you a lot of means of variation, of changing the difficulty as you want, and that's what made it kind of difficult to talk about it in terms of setting up the game. It's like...
Yeah, really difficult to
either have
explain everything.
6 or 8 cards when you start the game. Either draw 2 or 3 cards during the game. Do either have all your edge cards face up or change that number, include these more difficult advanced cards, or don't. There's all these different things you can do, and it all comes in this one box. So
a really small box too.
Yeah, to the game's credit, it comes with effectively an expansion in the box.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives you a lot of tools for adjusting it to your needs.
So I haven't played the solo game. In you playing the solo game and finding it really easy, how far did you push that? Did you use like all of the things to increase difficulty?
I never played with the Ravage.
The little token.
Because I felt like it was kind of silly, I guess. The idea that, like, this is just going to arbitrarily go on a random card that comes out, and that card's going to be...
level 3 that has it, yeah.
Well, I mean, there are multiple cards with it with the icon on it, but it's like, just one card will arbitrarily be much more powerful, and you have to go out of your way to stop it.
Yeah.
That does make the game more difficult, but I think it also is mechanically kind of a cop-out, and so I wasn't really interested in dealing with it.
Okay.
So instead I dealt with more or less everything else in the game. I don't think I played with the cards that block up your defender deck. And there's a specific reason for that too. Okay, so I guess one thing I want to talk about is how I initially thought that the drafting process within this game was pretty good. The recruiting what cards you want to end up with in your deck, and so you get a chance to sort of craft your deck to your needs, and you also see what is going, to...
What's going to be in your deck, yeah.
Yeah, and what you're not going to have.
Yeah.
That's great in terms of strategy. However, based on my repeated solo plays of the game, it came to the conclusion that it doesn't matter that much. Because I played one game where I did the drafting, played another game where I did the drafting. I played a variant I made up where I drafted both the Defender and the Ravage deck.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that when we tried the drafting for one of our 2-player games.
So I thought that, the inverse might be true, that if you spend time seeing what is going to come up in the Ravage deck, then you know how to plan against it, and so it's more strategic that way.
Yeah.
But also having an element of... it works like you do them at the same time, and like the inverse happens where like cards you would normally lose from your defender deck when you pull an edge card. The inverse also happens that like a column of cards for the Ravage deck will be automatically inserted and you can't do anything about it. So I thought that was really clever for some reason. Like I thought that was this is logically it's going to work out. And I think the setup for that took, I don't know, like 30 minutes because I was carefully considering everything or whatever. And then the game lasted all of like 5 minutes because I won almost instantly. For another reason that I'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So that was kind of a wash. And then I tried another version of that where I dealt both Defender deck and Ravage deck cards into the same columns and did this kind of weird back and forth, which was much more intricate and sort of difficult to keep track of what went where. And it also took longer. And again, it didn't seem to really make a difference because I won the game rather easily. So then I played a game where I just took everything that comes in the box, minus the cards that just junk up your defender deck, and I just shuffled it all together and gave myself, the equivalent of what I thought the number of cards were that you're supposed to have to play the game. There's no real set number, but I was kind of like, I don't know, put 40 cards in my defender deck and put, I did either 10 or 12
in each stack for the Ravages.
Each of the Ravage stacks, and it was all random, and I didn't even look at what cards were coming up, so I couldn't strategically plan at all, and I very easily won that too. So I kind of have come to the conclusion that the game, like, you shouldn't. There are better solo games out there, so you shouldn't buy it for the solo game experience because it's just, I don't think there's anything you can do to make it really work. I mean, it's just kind of like you do this thing, these cards come out, and you take care of them, and it's fine.
Sure.
I haven't played the 2-player game enough to really figure out if that's really worth pursuing. But I think there's a large problem inherent in the mechanics of the game if, for whatever reason, the 2-player game is so much more difficult. I mean, obviously, if it's challenging, then it's more worth playing. But also, if it's just too challenging, then it's not. And the kind of overwhelming opinion online seems to be that the 2-player game is too challenging, which means that I wouldn't be able to recommend it for either player count.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, solo games that I'd recommend over this, like the Friday I played once, and I felt like that was really challenging and also more interesting in terms of the decisions you're making along the way. So I think that would be a game that I'd recommend over this in terms of solo play. That being said, I don't really dislike the game. I think thematically it's fine, but it's kind of just a tower defense game, so you could just play, something like Castle Panic or whatever, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's a completely different type of game, but yeah, I know what you mean. What I think is interesting, though, is that in spite of that it's not a game that either of us would recommend to people, and we aren't really familiar with the theme of it because we haven't played the other games in the series.
But the theme is basically you are defending a forest and there's a forest fire coming to wipe you out. So that's as far as the theme really goes.
But what I think is interesting about it is that in spite of all of that, you in particular, between the two of us, but we both talked about it a fair amount, you in particular have spent a lot of time trying to come up with mechanics and variants for this to...
More than I would the average game.
Yeah. So I think that does say something about it, that there's something that, even though neither of us really like the game, that there's something about it that makes both of us interested enough to invest time in it. And I think that says something good about it. And I don't know what it is, that we think that it's worth trying to find, that right mixture of the difficulties to make it a game that's really playable and enjoyable.
Well, it's a really charming game. You know, the packaging, the presentation of the game is overall is very positive, despite the fact that the insert is... I mean, you know, I'm sure we filmed you opening it up. It looks like, oh, look at this thing.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. I knew you were going to talk about this, that during the opening, like, I said, oh, you know, it's got this good insert and it's cool. And then you, like, immediately after we turned off the cameras called me out, you were like, why did you call that insert good? And I was like, oh, well, what I meant was that, like, it's kind of interesting and cool artistically, and, like, the three-dimensional, like, the fire folded over each other. But it is, like, kind of fiddly and annoying every time you try to open the game.
And also over time, it's just going to get torn.
Yeah, it's just going to fall apart unless you're really careful.
So,
and then, like, the insert for it is... You know, you can't sleeve the cards if it's something that you wanted to do, which, like, the art on these is pretty interesting and cool looking. So it is a game where if it was something that I liked a lot and I was going to keep and I wanted to play all the time, I would probably want a sleeve. But you can't sleeve it and keep the insert. I don't know that you could take the insert out of this box and have it work.
I think since it's just thin cardboard, I think you'd have to have, like, a piece of...
You'd have to have something in there, to hold it up. You can't, like, sort the cards in any kind of meaningful fashion with the insert, because it's just, like, two wells to drop your cards into.
Yeah, there are more than two types of cards, really. You can be, like, you know, good cards over here, bad cards over here, but it kind of...
It'd be nice to be able to sort them and say, you know, like, okay, here's these, and then here are variants, and...
So it's like, you want to give Z-Man credit for trying, but you also want to tell them, you guys really didn't think this through, and do better next time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, comparative to other games that have no insert at all, or, you know, a Fantasy Flight game where it's a narrow slot that doesn't even hold the things that came with the game once you punch it out.
Indeed.
It's like... You know, it does work, but it's also kind of annoying.
Otherwise, like, components, what do you think? I already talked about, like, card art a little bit.
I don't... it's problematic because it's language independent.
Mm-hmm.
But
the iconography is terrible.
It's not... It's like... If you've played it enough times, you understand, oh, that's this menorah card means I discard cards, like, you know.
But, I mean, you could say that about any game, where, like, if you play it often enough, you just see the card and you know what that means. Overall, like, the iconography for what cards mean in this is just terrible.
You know, I think... Yeah, I don't know. I've played it 8 times, so I have no problem knowing what everything is. But it is a little, like, I don't think it would have been... I think it might have been worth it to, instead of having this giant picture of an abstract image of, like, an elephant shooting fire out of its trunk, to, you know, like... I guess it's not shooting fire.
It's shooting like water.
It's shooting water at the fire, but
it
looks like a cannon.
It does kind of look like a cannon. Yeah.
You know, instead have a card that says "Destroy Fire Elemental." You know,
or has like a fire elemental with a X through it or something.
It does have that, but
I mean, like, as the main feature of the card.
Yeah. So the normal cards, I would say, are not
too bad.
The additional cards, specifically the ones that are supposed to be one-time use that are good for you, are really awkward looking.
Yeah.
Like the one with the whales, and there's fire, and it's telling you that if you happen to get into a situation where you're about to lose and there are 12 elementals on the board, you would win instead.
Yeah. Completely nonsensical in terms of card design.
And that kind of leads me into what I was going to say earlier. The Dove's Armistice card
Yeah.
is so terrible in terms of it undermines the entire design of the game.
Yeah.
The idea that, oh, if you happen to have this and you draw up to 16 cards, you just win. And don't worry about it.
I thought it was 12.
It's 16.
Okay.
You might think that's like, because you're playing cards to defend yourself, maybe it's like you can't possibly... It's pretty easy to just like hold off a couple things and end up with 16 cards, because I did it in 3 different games.
Yeah.
And eventually I just went, okay, that's it. I am never playing this again. This needs to be removed from the game. It either needs to be removed from the game, or you need to change what it does, or you need to stack the deck so it goes like way in the bottom, so you can't like abuse it. And like if you draw at the start of the game, it's like, well, my strategy is just draw cards until I win.
Well, yeah. In the way that we were playing with those cards, where according to the rules, like they're supposed to be a sideboard, right?
Yeah, well, they are supposed to come up in the version where you do mobilization, so you would draft them out, and when you draft them, you don't mix them in with your defender deck, you put them off to the side, and you can use them one time.
Yeah.
I also think that mechanically doesn't make much sense. That makes the game way too easy.
Yeah, because if you have the doves if you get the doves during mobilization, then you just say, okay, well, all I want are the cards that let me, like, draw cards.
Even not just that card, like... having the ability to just, anytime you want, search the deck for 2 cards you need and use them. Having the ability to...
do any of the things.
Any of the things, really. There's no reason why you wouldn't mix it into the deck, really.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I don't really know what else to say about that. But the last game I played where I shuffled everything in, I shuffled those in too, so that when I drew them, I would just use them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's no reason not to. I also don't think there's any reason not to play with all of the cards. Like, I think it's a pain to sort things, and kind of like... one of the earlier iterations I did is I, like, tried to sort out so there were fewer, like, 3 fires. Like, I stacked it so that so it kind of scaled.
Yeah, I remember us talking about that.
There's no... I ultimately decided there's no benefit to that, so really just shuffle all the good and all the bad cards, and you end up with... they kind of counterbalance each other. I think the plain doves... whatever... I think they're just called doves. The ones that make you discard one of each of the Ravage decks. That's way too powerful. That either needs to cost more or do something weaker than what it does. Because if you do, you can just like, well, I play this and wipe out the last 2 cards in the deck and I just win. Like, I don't have to worry about the final... I was going to say the final countdown. That's not what it's called.
It's like the final push.
Whatever. The final assaults or whatever. There are just a lot of things about it that feel like it's not play tested properly, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the situation there is if there were changes that were made along the way, but...
And there's at least the one probably mistranslation from French to English, but maybe not true. I mean... That I talked about in the opening with drawing 2 cards or 3 versus 3 cards.
Yeah. So, ultimately, that's where I stand with this, is that I did spend a lot of time trying to figure out what would work for this game to try to make it work. I have reached the conclusion that I can't make it work, and I'm done with it.
Yeah.
Maybe this would be okay for someone else. I don't think it's me being like particularly good at strategy or anything. So I don't feel like it's like I'm just too good at this game. I think it's just not balanced well and either needs to be completely redone in terms of how the cards synergize with each other and made a new addition to fix those problems, or maybe someone who is just really, because it's not an entry-level game because of the fact that it's only 1 or 2 players, and because of the weird iconography issues, and so I don't really know who this game is for, other than people who really like the theme.
Sure. I guess, what would you rate this then?
You know, I initially really was into it, what it was trying to achieve, and I'm honestly at the point I've dropped down to, I would say, maybe a 4.5. Like, I really tried to be into this game, and I just do not think it mechanically pulls through overall. I think, again, I put more into trying to play this game than most games that we have reviewed. So I'm pretty confident in saying that, you know, where I stand now, I'm pretty resolute about it, that it's not...
Which is more or less where I started out. Like, we played the first game, I was like, I think that was terrible. Yeah. And then...
it's like, let me try some things, and we'll come back and try it again.
And then we tried it again, and then that didn't work, and I was like, it's even worse!
Yeah. So, you know... If people really care, they can read my comments on the logged plays about the things I try to do with the building the deck thing, if they really want that level of strategy. But I don't think I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
I wouldn't recommend this to anyone either.
So
okay, well, there you go. It's Sylvion, and we do not recommend that you check it out, but if you disagree with us, check it out. This is the Rain of Stones, and I don't know what it does.